I'm Mary, I'm Allie's mom.
I'm Steffi, I'm Allie's sister.
And today we're going to talk to you a little bit about some of our favorite books, series, authors.
I was a literature major in college, so she wanted me to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and I was not a literature major. Like I said, more just series and authors that I like, not specific books. I've read a lot of books over my lifetime, so I can't remember every book that was my favorite. But do you want to start?
This, I would say, is one of my favorites. You guys, if you watch this channel, have already heard a little bit about East of Eden. So I know Allie's talked a bit about it, because I got her to read it.
You got me to read it too, and I liked it a lot.
Yeah, it's really good. I don't know, I feel like I'd heard about it a lot, and then my fiance read it, and he really liked it and told me that I had to read it. I really like that it's like cross-generational. I feel like the first chapter or so, I was nervous that I was going to get really bored. It takes two separate families, but through generations of their family. And I know when Allie read it, she was like, I was not expecting it to be this entertaining. And I was like, I know, because there's a lot of good drama and stuff and a lot of good character development that you really see and kind of makes you reflect a little bit, which I enjoy.
Well, the first book I'm going to talk about is part of a series and movie made, Inkheart by Cornelia Funk. It's just obviously a middle grade novel, and the reason that I read it was because I probably read this when Allie was little to them. We used to read a lot of books out loud. So I have a lot of fun memories about that, which is one of the reasons.
To us too.
Yeah, to you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I don't remember when this came out. Maybe it was probably all of you kids I read it to. And then, of course, they've made movies out of this. So there's Inkheart, Inkspell, and Ink Death, maybe? But they're just like, fantasy, really entertaining. Even as an adult, I really enjoyed these. And then, of course, they made a movie out of them, which was fun to watch, too, just how they kind of brought this book to life. These are books that I did keep, and I have all three of those.
So one of the prompts that Allie gave me was to talk about classics that I liked and like reading classics. I am not as much of a reader as Allie is by any means, but I do really enjoy reading classics. I just haven't read a lot in the past years because I've been in school. That's been enough reading. But I thought I would show two books that I guess are considered classics that I think are good beginner classics if there's something you're intimidated by. That's The Catcher in the Rye and then The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I think that both of these books are fairly readable. Catcher in the Rye I would say maybe easier than Dorian Gray, but I think they're both just like really entertaining. This one, Catcher in the Rye, takes place in a very short period of time. So that helps me to get through it really quick. I think I literally got through it in one sitting, which is not typical for me. It just felt easier to get through. And both of these, I think, like have drama and things going on that they're easier to get through the language. Like I said, Oscar Wilde a little bit less, a little bit more Old English.
What's that one about?
This one's really interesting. It's like about a guy. There's like a lot of philosophy in this one, I will say. It's about a guy who basically knows he's beautiful and there's this picture painted of him and he gets upset because he knows that he will only age and therefore become less beautiful. And then the whole thing is kind of him coping with that, and I won't give away too much.
Actually, one of my favorite books is from Oscar Wilde, but it's one of his younger books about the giant. What's that? The one with the giant that he's mean. The kids like sneak over the wall to get into his beautiful garden. I know I've read that one.
Selfish Giant?
The Selfish Giant. I read that to you guys when you were little. And that's a really good one. I might have that somewhere. That's a great book. So kind of along the line of classics, Jane Austen. And two of my favorite books of hers are Pride and Prejudice and Emma. And these are particularly pretty copies, just Barnes & Noble copies, but I think they're really pretty. These are ones I need to reread. I haven't read them for a while. Emma is kind of quirky and cute. Emma's sassy and just a fun character. I really enjoyed this book. Pride and Prejudice, the thing I like most about this is it reminds me of my mom because she loved not necessarily the book as much as the movie. I think she watched, yeah, especially the Keira Knightley version she liked, but she watched every version of Pride and Prejudice from the BBC versions to anything, and I think she knew this off by heart, but it was the one thing that she could watch over and over again, and she loved it. So it reminds me of her, but just fun to read about what it was like to live back in this time, and any Jane Austen book is fun.
One of the prompts that Allie gave me to pick out books was that I was explaining to her that because I was an English major in college, I was taking a lot of literature classes at the same time. So I feel like I ended up like half reading, half spark noting a lot of books just because it was so much reading to keep up with. And so she said, pick some books that you feel like you could see yourself going back to and wanting to reread from those. And the first one that came to mind was The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. I think this is a really interesting story. It's about this guy who, I think they call it a sanatorium, but he basically like goes to the top of this mountain in like the Swiss Alps. It's just really interesting. It's like a classic story of like where you get there and you are like a little bit sick and then you start getting more sick, things like that, where you like start feeling like you're like, it's kind of like a good character progression into madness, which is really interesting to read. And then I guess the other thing too, I've read complete stories, obviously, of Flannery O'Connor because she does a lot of short stories. I feel like I've probably read about half of the complete stories, but I would go back and try to read more of Flannery O'Connor's works. She's really entertaining. If you've never read her stuff, like sometimes there's certain aspects that can almost be like so aggressive that it's humorous, where there'll be like so much violence in like such a short amount of time, or it feels like for no reason that it can almost be humorous. And she does a lot of trying to point out humanity's flaws through that extremity. And she's from the South, and that really comes through in a lot of her characters and some of the situations they're in. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, I just recently read Wise Blood. Is that in that book?
It might be.
That, and apparently was her first book that she wrote when she was in her early 20s. All right. The way I did it, like I said, was more series and authors. And I know Allie's also spoken about Kate Morton is one of her favorite authors, also one of mine. And her book's not a series in the sense that the characters are the same, but she has the same formula, which is there's usually somebody in present time that's trying to solve a mystery from the past, some family mystery, which she and I both like those books a lot. And this is one of my favorite ones, The Forgotten Garden. I just love her imagery and makes you feel like, you know, you would love to be where they are. And there's all the mysteries are always great. The stories are, the character development's amazing. The stories are very well thought out, and all her books are really pretty too. Pretty covers.
This is one that I recently read, God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater by Kurt Vonnegut. I've read a lot of Kurt Vonnegut stuff and I enjoy it all. Really quick to get through typically, just from his writing style. I think that this might be my favorite of the ones that he's written, though, which I feel like is not popular opinion because he's got very much more famous ones like Slaughterhouse-Five and all that. It's about this guy who is the heir to the Rosewater Fund, which is basically like this organization where you can pretty much decide what to do with all this generational wealth, and a lawyer who is trying to make this man be seen in court as crazy so that this money can get transferred and that he can be part of the transitioning of those hands. It's just really interesting because it's a lot of how this guy deals with this generational wealth and his obsession with understanding poverty, but he is kind of going crazy. It's interesting to kind of like make your own determination about whether or not he is crazy, not crazy, what he values as important is important or not important.
All right. This is probably one of my all-time favorite authors, Martha Grimes. This is just one book in the Richard Drury series. And this is actually one of the more recent novels. I think the first one was written in 1980 or 81, which was when I was in high school. And I was introduced to her by my father, who loved what he called a cozy mystery or a British detective. This is more British detective, not quite as cozy. Her writing is amazing. She's very verbose as far as describing everything. So there can be pages and pages and pages with no conversation. But her character development is just, her characters are awesome. It was kind of fun reading these. I started reading them when there were several, and I was way younger than the characters. But then as I got into it, like I kind of got to be the same age as some of the characters. They're fun. It's a fun cast of characters who carry through all the books. And there's always a mystery. Richard Drury is the Scotland Yard detective, and he has this whole cast of characters that help him solve the mysteries, and they're a lot of fun. So like I said, this one was only written probably within the last 10 years. You can go all the way back to 1980 or 81, and there's like 25 books in the series. And so I just recently, because I've read the series a couple times, I just recently started listening to the audiobooks whenever I'm driving and or doing yard work or whatever. And that's really fun too, to like hear the characters kind of come to life in somebody else's voice.
Well, I guess like very much in contrast to that Kurt Vonnegut one, which is very, I don't know what I'm saying. My last book that I have to show is actually not a book, but a play. This was gifted to me by my fiance who really liked it. So it's written by Carol Wojtyła, who is Pope St. John Paul II. He wrote this while he was a priest, but not yet Pope, as far as I know. Someone might have to fact check.
Didn't he write a lot of plays?
He wrote a couple plays.
He was an actor?
Yeah, he was like an actor, and I guess that they would perform this like kind of underground. But it's really interesting. It like follows 3 different couples. It was a really good reflection point for me because it goes through these different couples in these different stages of life and with their different anxieties and fears. But then it kind of always points you back to God, which I think is really great. But it's just really interesting how they come to that conclusion and the parallels of all these 3 and then how all of these 3 couples intertwine. And I mean, it's written like a play. That's an interesting read and it's fairly short, but I took a while to read it just because there's a lot to think about as you read it. I would highly recommend. I think it's interesting with people like popes or saints or things like that where we don't realize that they have a lot of these cool writings out there.
Well, I'm going to read a lot of those books that you talked about.
Too.
I have one more author series that, and Allie's also spoken about this, and apologize for the black book. So I take all my covers off. I like the way they look on the shelves better. But this is The Silkworm, which is the first book in the Robert Galbraith, which is really J.K. Rowling, following Cormoran Strike, the detective. They're just such well-written books. And like I said, I know Allie's, if you've watched any of her other videos, she's read are you caught up on the series, Allie? Yeah, the whole thing. And I've also then watched the series. It's on HBO. Just they did a great job of staying true to the book. The only other author that I wanted to talk about that I love is Dean Koontz. I like him better than Stephen King. They're kind of opposites a little bit. Like Stephen King's are more like evilly, and Dean Koontz writes a lot more of like good versus evil, and evil usually triumphs, and a lot of like conspiracy stuff. And I love him. My favorite books that Dean Koontz wrote, and I don't have them. I must have gotten rid of them, which I don't know why, because I'd like to reread them, is the Odd Thomas series, which is about this sweet boy that works as a fry cook in a diner. And he has just a lot of people around him that really love him because he's so sweet, but he can see dead people. And it causes a lot of grief for him. They always come to him for help. They're just really good books. I like them a lot.
There's a movie of that one too,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, the movies are good. And they're not, I mean, the books are way more in depth than the movies. And I think they only did a couple. But there was like a whole series. And they're very melancholy because there's a lot of sadness in his life. But especially because he can see dead people. But they're just great, and I love Dean Koontz. He's like really quirky. If you ever like, I get emails. I somehow got on his email list, and he's a very, very quirky guy, and he loves dogs. So there's always dogs in his book, and even in the Odd Thomas series, there's a dead dog that follows Thomas, but he's like Thomas's pet because he's with him all the time. So.
When I was little, I really enjoyed some of the books that Allie's talked about. I loved and still love most anything by Roald Dahl, specifically Witch Witch. I really liked that one.
Which is Eva Ibbotson, I think.
There is a Witches one that he wrote though.
Oh yeah,
The Witches.
The Witches.
The Witches.
The Witches. Well, I did like Witch too. I liked Eva Ebbetson too. Yeah, so I always really liked Roald Dahl. Liked Eva Ebbetson. I really enjoyed the Mysterious Benedict Society. Mm-hmm. That was probably one of the first series of books that I like really got into. We also read these books, I remember, I think it's a series, but the first one is called The Name of This Book is Secret.
Oh yeah.
And I loved those books.
I think we have those still.
I think we do too. Oh, I remember the first books that I like actually couldn't put down was the Divergent series. I was like the perfect age when those came out, and the movies don't do them justice. I loved the books, and my gram also really loved the books at the same time, so we would talk about the Divergent series a lot.
I didn't know she read those.
She loved it.
Yeah.
She was like, I like those YA books.
I read all the Nancy Drew books. I used to read. I mean, I really can't remember. I read a lot when I was little. I don't remember when I was really little, but when I was more like in high school and stuff, I used to read a ton. But when I was younger, it was probably a lot more like the Nancy Drew and those kinds of books. I can't really remember. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you got some inspiration to maybe go back and revisit some books you loved in the past or find some new authors. I know just listening to Steph, like most of the books that you talked about I haven't read, and I think I'm going to try to read some of them.
And pulling them out, I definitely got some inspiration for rereads for these upcoming months. Make sure to like and subscribe. Comment to Allie maybe some of your top 5 favorites of all time. All right.
Bye.
Have a good day.